Welcome to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports. And you can follow me on Twitter as well at the same, at Kevin Gray Sports. Mavericks dominate the Miami Heat for a 111-92 win on the road as they take them out by 19 points, as the Mavericks now move to 50-30 on the season, a season high 20 games above 500. Jason Kidd, for the second time as head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, gets at least 50 wins in the regular season. Of course, the Mavericks went 52-30 in his first season as Mavericks head coach. Last year, the Mavericks finishing at 38-44. This year, 50-30 through 80 games with 2 games to go in the regular season, as the Mavericks lock up the 5th seed and will be no lower than 5th in the Western Conference, setting up what would be a trilogy with the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round of the NBA playoffs, as they will meet the Clippers for the third time in the last 5 years, as the Mavericks are now 16-2 in their last 18 games with the number 1 defensive rating during that 18-game span to get their 5th consecutive win, also moving to 9-2 in their last 11 road games. The only 2 losses in that time, of course, to the Oklahoma City Thunder when Luka Doncic did not play, and then, of course, losing the final game of what was their 5-game road trip to the Golden State Warriors, in a game that they still had a chance to win if they had got a call go their way with 12 seconds to go, and they didn't call Klay Thompson for traveling in that situation. But that's neither here nor there at this point, as the Mavericks were able to get their 25th road win of the year. And now with 2 games to go, 1 final home game on Friday against the Detroit Pistons before they finish up on the road on Sunday against the Oklahoma City Thunder, as they continue to battle for the number 1 seed in the Western Conference after the Thunder clobbered the San Antonio Spurs without Victor Wembanyama on Wednesday night. But this is all about the Mavericks and the defense that they showed, especially in that second half where they only gave up 18 points in the fourth quarter. They raced out to what was a 22-point lead at halftime. They were able to use a 13-3 run at the end of the first quarter, led by Kyrie Irving, who scored the final 10 points of that first quarter, as Luka Doncic picked up 3 fouls in the first quarter, but Kyrie was able to pick him up and be able to help this team out to what was a 9-point lead at the end of one. They were able to turn it up in the second quarter and really able to dominate from there. As we go through this game, we'll go through some of the things that happened throughout the course of this game, but Luka Doncic finishing the game with 29 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists, well on his way to his 5th consecutive first-team All-NBA selection, trying to make things that much more difficult in the MVP discussion as well, making what could be one final statement for this Mavericks team this season as he tries to win his first ever NBA MVP. Of course, Nikola Jokic appears to be the leader in the clubhouse right now for the league's MVP, as he looks to win his 3rd such MVP in the last 4 seasons. But again, that's neither here nor there, as the Mavericks as a team continue to dominate with their defense, timely shooting, especially in the first quarter, as well as they were knocking down threes at an extremely high rate. But they're being led by their defense, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, number 1 in the NBA over the last 18 games in terms of defensive rating. That was led by Daniel Gafford and this team throughout the course of the game against Miami. The Dallas Mavericks blocking 8 shots. You saw several weak side blocks, whether it be P.J. Washington or Derrick Jones Jr., Maxi Kleber being able to help out on the defensive end as well. Another collective effort to take out a Miami Heat team who needed to win this game as well, because they're trying to scratch and claw to get to the top 6 of the East and avoid the play-in themselves. That was a big blow in terms of their chances to get out of the play-in situation with their loss to the Dallas Mavericks. Both teams came into the game on the second night of a back-to-back. Of course, the Mavericks had dominated the Charlotte Hornets on the road the previous night on Tuesday. Miami had came back to South Beach after earning what was a double overtime win on the road against the Atlanta Hawks. And one thing I said coming into this game against Miami is that the Dallas Mavericks would need to come out with energy and force against what would be a tired Miami Heat team. And that's exactly what they were, as they were sleepwalking, especially in the first half, where at one point the Mavericks held Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo to just a combined 2 of 11 from the field. The yeoman's work that this Mavericks defense did on the Miami Heat's 2 best players in terms of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo was absolutely sensational throughout the course of the game, particularly in the first half, as they were able to take themselves to a 22-point lead at the end of the first half. And they dominated in terms of the fast break as well in this game. You look at what they were able to do, outscoring the Miami Heat 24-5 in fast break points, a plus 19. They forced 18 turnovers, which led to 19 points off of those turnovers. The Mavericks dominated in every facet of the game and were able to really put the pedal to the metal to Miami, especially during the first 24 minutes of the game, where the Mavericks looked like a team that wanted to get that 50th win and maybe have an opportunity to rest some guys in the final 2 games of the season, because their seeding won't change. They could move up to 4th, depending on what happens in the last couple of regular season games for the Clippers, but the Clippers do own the tiebreaker over the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks saw the Clippers not play Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and James Harden in their game against the Phoenix Suns. But at the same time, for the Mavericks, they are continuing to do what they have to do to win games moving forward and put themselves in a terrific spot, now going not only back to the postseason, but will finish comfortably in the top 6 of the West, as I mentioned, finishing no lower than the 5th seed by the time we get to the regular season end. Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs and hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, in Aura. And on the other side of the break, more on how the Mavericks were able to dominate the Miami Heat to not only get themselves the win, but set themselves up for hopefully a deep postseason run. More on that as we hear from Aura, today's sponsor of our podcast and our video. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, inside the 97.1 The Freak studios, after the Mavericks get the 19-point win on the road over the Miami Heat, 111-92, 9-2 in their last 11 road games, 16 wins in their last 18 tries, 5 straight wins, all the fantastic numbers for this Mavericks team as they continue to dominate during the second half of the season, as Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Daniel Gafford, who was another perfect 6 of 6 from the field. My man's now made 22 straight field goals for the Mavericks as he continues to be not only a fantastic finisher on the offensive end, but also a rim protector and a shot blocker on the other end. With those 22 consecutive made field goals, Gafford becomes the first player in the play-by-play era to have multiple streaks of making at least 20 straight field goals. Of course, he had the 33 straight made field goals that he had earlier in this season with the Mavericks. Daniel Gafford, top 10 shot blocker in the league, leading the NBA in field goal percentage, not hurting that number at all with the 6-for-6 performance, 6-for-6 perfect performance that he had, of course, against the Miami Heat. But for the Mavericks, what a turnaround it's been for this team, a team that at one point was 26-23, now sees themselves 24-7 over their last 31 games to get themselves to this point where the Mavericks have turned themselves into one of the best teams in the NBA. That 16-2 mark, the best record in the league over the last 18, the 24-7 mark. The Boston Celtics, of course, dominating in what they're doing in the Eastern Conference, the only team with a better record during that time. But at the same time, for the Mavericks, they are being led by their defense, and you saw that in the second half of the game against the Miami Heat. Miami was game, especially in that third quarter, where they were able to get themselves back into the game, where at one point they were able to, I should say, to get themselves back in the game in the fourth quarter, where at one point they were able to cut the lead to 8 after they outscored the Mavericks 12-6, to begin that fourth quarter. And eventually the Mavericks were able to use what was a 15-4 run to close it out as they were able to clear the benches with 2 minutes left to go in the game. Mavericks, of course, were able to take what was a 14-point lead into that fourth quarter as they were able to use the Heat went on a 12-3 run to eventually cut the lead to 13 at 85-72 with a minute and a half left. A vintage performance from Kevin Love, especially in that third quarter where he went 4-4 from the field as the Heat shot 53% from the field. Mavs went cold, in fact, going over 3.5 minutes without a basket at that particular point, as Josh Green was able to make his return to the Mavericks after missing the previous 12 games. Of course, with his ankle sprain, he got his first points of the game when he ended that Heat 12-3 run with a three-pointer of his own to get the Mavericks back up to a lead of 16 at 88-72. But that is a microcosm of what this night was for the Mavericks, a collective team effort, getting contributions from a lot of different guys. The defensive effort with the shot blocking, we mentioned a little bit earlier with the 8 blocks that they had in the game, turning Miami over constantly throughout the course of the game, but more importantly, getting timely scoring when they needed it. And Josh Green was a part of that as well. And you continue to give this team credit for the way that they have gelled during the second half of the year. I mentioned the fact that at one point they were 26-23, now 24-7 over their last 31 games. And one thing that when we look back at this season, no matter how it ends or when it ends, is the fact that this team was able to not only gel during the second half of the year, but how quickly they were able to build the chemistry and trust with the guys that they had on this team. And you give a guy like PJ Washington credit for bouncing back in the game against Miami. Of course, struggled against his former team in Charlotte on Tuesday, came back. It was a +10, had 12 points in the game, played much better. In fact, knocking down a couple of threes in the game as well in support of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Luka and Kyrie, of course, combining for 54 points on the night in the win for the Mavericks. But again, what we talk about all the time with this team is the chemistry, the trust, the communication, something that Jason Kidd has continued to preach over and over with this team and has led to a formula of the defensive effort consistently night in and night out. Because you and I have discussed a lot during the course of the season and before the season started, if the Mavericks could simply play average on defense, this team was going to win a lot of ball games this season. And they've clearly exceeded those expectations with the way that they have played defense, especially during the second half of the year. And we have a large enough sample size to where you and I can start to believe in what this team is actually doing on both ends of the floor, especially on the defensive end, when you've got a team that's been number one in defensive rating over a near 20-game span versus a variety of opponents. And even a game like this, where the Miami Heat came into the game number 4 in the NBA in defensive rating this season, the Mavericks were able to put up 111 points and hold Miami to under 100 points. So whether it's beating the Nuggets with a buzzer beater, whether it's being able to get 2 crucial wins on the road against the Sacramento Kings, all of this started when the Mavericks were able to take out the Miami Heat. When the last time they saw them back on March 7th at the American Airlines Center, the Mavericks were down by as many as 15 in that game, getting booed off the floor. But the Mavericks made a concerted effort to win that game. Luka Doncic had a monster triple-double that night, and that's when things started to turn around for this team, and they have been rolling ever since. 2 high marks for this team, obviously clinching a playoff spot against Charlotte, and now getting another win against the Miami Heat to sweep the season series with them. Seminal and pivotal moments for this team, because we remember last year how this team was careening to a 38-44 record, losing to the Charlotte Hornets in terrible fashion, and now this year being able to clinch a playoff spot on the road in Charlotte, and now being able to finish off the Miami Heat in their season series, bookmarking what has been a huge turnaround for this team throughout the course of the last 30-plus games for the Mavericks. More numbers on this game when it comes to the history that was made with the win against the Miami Heat. The Mavericks secured their 5th division title in franchise history, improving to 50-30, a season-high 20 games above 500, recording its 16th 50-win season in franchise history, and of course its second in the last 3 years when they went 52-30 in the 21-22 season when they went to the Western Conference Finals. And as much criticism as I've levied on Jason Kidd, as much criticism as this fan base and the MFFLs have laid on Jason Kidd, you have to give him a ton of credit. The lineup change, inserting Daniel Gafford and Derrick Jones Jr. into the starting lineup. This team now 17-1 with Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup for this team. He has been absolutely fantastic. They got Josh Green back as well to be able to provide some energy and some hustle off the bench. You saw that with his ability to keep plays alive for second chance opportunities for the Mavericks in this game as well. And hopefully with the return of Derek Lively, who we will not see, of course, for the remainder of the regular season, and why it was so crucial for this team to finish comfortably in the top 6, another week of rest that Derek Lively II will have to be able to be a part of this playoff rotation. As we get toward the end of the regular season and get ready to preview the series between the Mavericks and the Clippers, we'll talk about how this team looks like from a rotation perspective now that Josh Green is back, once they get Derek Lively II back as well, and what that will begin to look like. And you can start to let me know in the comments as well what you think this 8-9-man rotation is going to look like in the postseason, knowing that they've got their starting 5 solidified with Luka, Kyrie, Daniel Gafford, Derrick Jones Jr., and PJ Washington. What does that next 4 to 5 guys look like behind them, whether it be Maxi Kleber, Tim Hardaway Jr., Josh Green returning to the mix, obviously Dante Exum, part of that mix as well. They've got a lot of depth, and of course, with the return of Derek Lively, several options that this team will have as they start to build out their playoff rotations. But one thing that they have done and done consistently is defend, and that can go with them at any point during the course of the throughout the entirety of what hopefully is a deep postseason run for this team. But regardless of how this season ends, the foundation has been laid. They have put themselves in a spot where they've got guys that have now started to learn how to play alongside Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and they've been able to stay healthy for the most part throughout the course of this now 31-game run. And for Kyrie Irving, playing over 30 consecutive games as he played through Ramadan and was absolutely sensational during that run as well. Luka Doncic has been dealing with injuries throughout the course of the season. Hopefully for him, as they get ready to take on the Detroit Pistons on Friday, he'll be able to eventually get some rest, especially when you look at the playoff situation. They're locked in to where they're going to be that, whether it's the 4 seed, if they get some breaks from the Los Angeles Clippers in the last couple of games of the year, but obviously and most likely will be there in that 5th seed and will have to go on the road to start off their first round series against the Clippers. What that rest will look like and what additional rest maybe Kyrie and Luka can get, because they're due for some rest. Obviously, they'll want to go out in front of the home fans in their final home game of the season to put on a show, to be able to make sure they take care of business against the Detroit Pistons, and then be able to hopefully rest from there as they get ready for this postseason run where all of these guys are beat up. And for me, the question that we'll start to discuss as well when it comes to this team through the next week or so, how much gas is left in the tank as this team has been in playoff mode really since the beginning of February. They have expended a lot of energy to get to this point where they would comfortably be in the top 6 of the West. They've accomplished that now, winning a division title, winning 50 games, and now have put themselves in position to get ready to take on the Clippers in the first round of the playoffs. What will that gas tank look like? Again, another huge element to why they had to finish in the top 6 to get them that extra rest, because they've been going so hard physically, emotionally, and what they've been able to do to put themselves in this position to earn the rest that they're going to get before the postseason starts. But they dominate the Miami Heat from start to finish. They're able to make sure that they were handling their business in the second half. Miami tried to claw themselves back in it. They were able to cut the lead to 13 in the third quarter, cut the lead to 8 in the fourth quarter, but the Mavericks simply were not having it. And the heroes of the game, particularly Daniel Gafford that we mentioned with the monster game that he had, obviously with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving continue to do, they were able to combine to hit 9 3-pointers in this game, going a combined 9 of 23 from downtown, as the Mavericks shot 34% from 3, nearly 50% overall from the field. And they continue to win in a variety of ways, and this time taking out a game Miami Heat team who was sleepwalking in the first half, sluggish in the first half, tried to come back a little bit in the second half, but it simply wasn't enough for a team that is maturing and growing. And that's one thing that I love about this Mavericks team, and I tweeted about it at Kevin Gray Sports during the course of the game, is that to come out and dominate the way that they did in the first half on the second night of a back-to-back, where they easily could have led up and found themselves losing this game to the Miami Heat. They were the aggressors. They were the ones putting the pressure on the Miami Heat throughout the course of that first half. Even with Luka Doncic getting into foul trouble, the superstar teammate and Kyrie Irving picking up his teammate, hitting a buzzer beater at the end of the first quarter to give them what was a 9-point lead, scoring the final 10 points of that first quarter. Just another reason why you have to feel great about the chances of this team, because they have learned how to play with one another, how to play off of one another, and to be able to allow them to trust each other in the biggest of moments to be able to win ball games in a variety of ways, where we've talked about them being the best clutch team in the NBA this year. So everything pointing upward for the Dallas Mavericks after getting another massive win on the road. They are winning at home. They're winning on the road. They're beating up on bad teams. They're beating good teams. And they have now got themselves to the point where they've won 50 games, at least 50 games, for the second time in the last 3 seasons, and Jason Kidd being able to lead this team to be able to do so. And Luka Doncic making another final statement and push for his MVP candidacy in a year where he's had a 50-point game on Christmas Day, 73 points against the Atlanta Hawks this year. Obviously is going to be averaging over 33 points per game, nearly 10 assists per game, and over 9 rebounds per game this year. Has put himself in the top 2 of the NBA's MVP conversation alongside Nikola Jokic. I tweeted it out before the game as well. What's keeping Luka Doncic from winning the NBA's MVP? All the numbers are there. The winning is there. Top 5 team in the West. There's precedent for a guy in Nikola Jokic and Russell Westbrook who have won the NBA's MVP when finishing in the 6th area when it comes to the Western Conference. For me, Luka Doncic is the 2023-2024 NBA MVP. And it's not just because I cover this team and obviously talk about this team. The body of work that Luka Doncic has put together, to me, screams leading MVP candidate. And now his team has done the kind of winning that would solidify that candidacy. And if nothing else, what this run has done for this team during the course of the last 30, 31 games, and regardless of how the season finishes, the groundwork and the foundation has been laid for Luka Doncic to be the leading MVP candidate going into next season. And with this team hopefully continuing to grow and improve throughout the course of the summer with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, that will lead to a narrative that will allow Luka Doncic to remain in the focus of the top 2 of the MVP discussions at the course of next season as well. But he has closed fast on Nikola Jokic during the second half of the year, particularly over the last 30-plus games, to really make this conversation difficult and maybe even changing the minds of some voters who may have thought that Nikola Jokic was the MVP in the clubhouse, but have watched Luka Doncic and this team absolutely dominate over the last 2.5 months to get themselves in this spot where they are the most dangerous team right now. To me, the most dangerous team in the Western Conference, and a team that no one wants to see in the West. And if you're the Los Angeles Clippers, yeah, you may have beaten the Mavericks the first couple of times that they've met in the playoffs, but this is a different Mavericks team that defends, knocks down shots, and has 2 guys at the top, and Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who you could arguably say are the best duo in the NBA this season and have proven it time and time again. When Luka Doncic being able to dominate in first halves, Kyrie Irving closing in second halves, particularly in the fourth quarter. This team is as good as any in the league. It's ironic because if you were to put this team in the Mavericks in the Eastern Conference with the 50 wins that they have, they would be the number 2 seed in the East. Number 1, that just shows you how bananas the Western Conference has been so far this year, but also maybe how poorly the East has been. But it gives you an idea of just where the Mavericks are and how good they've been during the second half of the year. And you give them a ton of credit as they take out the Miami Heat. They sweep their quick 2-game road trip, have now won 5 straight games, and now 16 of their last 18 with 2 games to go in the regular season as they finish up their final home game of the regular season on Friday against Detroit. And then they'll take on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Oklahoma City Thunder on the road on Sunday to complete the regular season before they get a week off and watch these other teams battle it out in the play-in before they take on the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round of the NBA playoffs. I, for one, simply cannot wait to get to the NBA playoffs. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you so much for joining me here on this latest episode of Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, please subscribe and like and comment on the video as well. Give me a vibe check. Let me know how you're feeling about the Mavericks as they are simply rolling right now, as they have now won 5 straight games in 16 of their last 18. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. This has been Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. I'll talk to you later. Peace.